Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Dan Pannachio, your host for tonight. Today we have as my guest Sal Marino. How are you doing, Sal?
Doing really good. How about you?
Okay. We're going to be talking about a subject that I believe most people, or many people at least, have an interest in, and that would be model railroading. So let's get started, okay?
Okay.
Sal, how did you get started into model railroading?
I guess like many people my age, back in grammar school, I got a Lionel train set for Christmas, and I started making a layout with it and stuff like that, and I decided to try and enlarge it. I bought, every time it was a gift-giving occasion, I asked my parents or whatever, buy me another train or something like that. And in them days, it was pretty standard to make a 4x8 sheet of plywood was a layout. And with Lionel trains, you could make like an oval on, two ovals on it, or you could put an oval on the outside and a figure 8 on the inside. And they sold plasticville houses and plastic trees and grass that was actually dyed sawdust. And you sprinkle that, and earth was also dyed sawdust. And you started with that. And I kept at it, and over the years I built it up. And
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, many people back in those days.
It was very popular,
Right.
especially on the East Coast. I don't know how far west Lionel trains were sold, but
Both boys and girls.
yes, they had a girls set in the 60s,
Yeah.
which became a very collectible item.
Uh-huh.
And then over the years, they started making it again.
Yeah.
So
But model railroading, like, to mention a brand, I hope it, Lionel actually started in 1901, I believe.
well, they started way back
Yeah.
with what was called standard gauge, and that was very big size trains. And then I guess it was pretty popular back then. It was very expensive. I remember in my store I had a reproduction of an ad from 1935, and a Lionel locomotive, and it wasn't a very big locomotive. It was probably maybe a foot long, maybe 14 inches, and it was $75. Back in the 30s, $75 was probably 2 weeks' pay for the average guy.
At least 2 weeks' pay.
You know,
yes, yeah.
so it was very expensive.
I remember in the 50s, my dad used to come home with a paycheck of $75 a week.
Right,
So,
and a Lionel set was $50, $60. That was for the run of the mill. They had, more expensive sets, but what the average person bought, it was like $50, $60 set. And so, I kept adding to my set over the years. And then, for some reason in the mid-60s, I had made a pretty big Lionel layout. And in the mid-60s, I discovered HO. I bought a magazine, and I saw HO was much more manageable as far as size goes.
right.
You could
And they were
fit-
more detailed then.
They're
too.
much more detailed. Lionel, what a lot of people don't understand, Lionel is really a toy. It's not a hobby item. Today, it's more of a hobby item, but back then, it was a toy. It was just like you went to a toy store and bought, instead of buying a set of trains, you could buy a wagon or a fire truck or something like that. It was in that category. And over the years, I guess HO was considered more of a hobby. And when HO started to take off, it almost coincided with Lionel going down. Lionel in the mid-60s started going downhill, whereas HO also started probably in the 30s and worked its way through the Depression. And it was a good item during the Depression because HO was mostly kits. And back then you could buy a kit for under $1 and you could work on it for days and days. And, it would take your mind off the fact that you didn't have a job or whatever. after that, it started growing and growing, and it really kind of came into its own in the 60s.
From what I understand now, this day and age, this year, I read recently that there's something like 500,000 hobbyists. You know, if you want to put a number on it.
I don't know. That
if
sounds
they
kind of
could
high to me. I remember when I was in the business in the mid to late 70s, Model Railroad magazine, which is the premier magazine in the hobby, had a circulation of around 250,000 people. That's 250,000 people cared enough about the hobby. Back in them days, it was like 75 cents for the magazine. Today, the circulation is down to, I don't know, 60,000, 65,000, as will magazines. I mean, it's not just model railroading. People really don't read magazines very much anymore.
But you still see shows.
Train shows are a big thing.
Yeah.
The reason train shows are a big thing, kind of getting ahead of ourselves now, but the reason that train shows are a big thing is because hobby shops have basically disappeared. The internet has taken over, and most people that are into trains today buy their trains on the internet. And so there's really no place to go locally if there's a certain amount of people that will not use the internet. There are people who want to touch something before they buy it. And so the shows have become a big thing. When you go to a show, though, and you see a lot of people there, the vast majority of people are not buying. They're showing. They have layouts where the kids can watch trains run, and every kid loves that. Okay. I guess the problem with trains today is once the kids start to grow up and be teenagers, when we wanted trains, it's all different today. They are into computers and games like that, and trains. You know, even when I think back up myself, trains, I guess after, you know, you watch a train run in a circle. How many times can you watch that train run around in a circle?
Right.
It kind of gets boring too, but back then we didn't really have anything else to do.
Well,
so
you said, you were, let's get back to you now. You said something about how you got started. How did you become involved? You know, how did you gain your enthusiasm into it?
How did I get into it? Well,
Yeah,
back then every kid liked trains.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted Lionel trains for Christmas.
Well, you saw those commercials on the TV.
They were on TV.
Yeah.
You know, it was a big thing.
One year they were in black and white, and when the color came in, they...
Right, and so, you know, everybody wanted them. And a lot of kids in my school had trains, and we would talk about them and stuff like that. Now, very few people that I know anything about trains. They certainly don't collect them or use them. It's gone way down, you know, unfortunately. But it's different now. It's different. It's gone a lot different. But I got so enthusiastic about it that I wound up getting into the model railroad business. And
how did you start that? How did you do?
Well, when I started, Lionel trains was a little different because you could buy them at several stores on Staten Island. Don't forget, back then Staten Island was small. There was only under 200,000 population, so we didn't have all the stores. But when I changed over to HO, we didn't have any stores on Staten Island. I had to go to either Manhattan or I went to Jersey, and we didn't have any place you could buy literally anything on Staten Island. And so I decided that, you know, maybe I should do it. Another thing I noticed about back then, there was absolutely no discount on, especially HO. Lionel, was probably some discounting, stores ran sales. HO, the price of everything was written on the box, and that's what it sold for. If it said $1.98, that's what it sold for, $1.98. And almost everything in life.
A train sold for $1.98.
Yeah, like
a
a freight car, you know, or a plastic house or something like that. Would be a couple dollars.
Well, that was a lot of money then. You know.
Well, it was a lot of money then, but it's still it was reasonable. HO compared to Lionel, HO was very inexpensive. but you need a lot more to fill that table, you know, so it kind of works out that way a little bit too. But I also noticed, like I say, there was no discounting, so and almost everything you bought back then, it was, you know, that was the start of discounting. You had like the two guys from Harrison and stores like that started discounting Corvettes and places like that. So, you know, I decided maybe there was a need for some discounting, maybe a need for a train store on Staten Island. So I tried to do it. I came from an industry. I came from the grocery industry. That was my background. And the grocery industry works on high volume and very low profit. So I decided to try to apply that to model trains. And I was very successful. I built a successful business. I wound up with a building that was 5,000 square feet, and it was filled with trains. And we became distributors. We even had products made specially for us. So we had a pretty good thing going, and that was, you know.
Well, when do you feel that the business started to? I mean, interest in trains started to.
Well, a whole bunch of things happened at the same time. Interest in trains started going down. The internet started going in. So if you were a hobby shop, you were fighting a declining interest, and the interest that was left, the guys on the internet. When I started discounting, I was the only one discounting. 20 years later, everybody was discounting, except maybe some small hobby shops and stuff like that. But the internet was built on discounting. I made my business in mail order. I started in mail order, and mail order was the internet of back then. Instead of advertising on the internet, you put ads in the model railroad magazines, and people sent you orders. And I started in the mail order business with the trains. I had absolutely no experience. I had no experience selling trains, and I had no experience in the mail order business. I never even bought anything mail order my whole life. But I looked at it. I said,
no Susan Roebuck for you, huh?
No. So I said, you know, I looked at it and I decided I investigated it, and, you know, and I said, well, you know, we buy some boxes and we'd put the stuff in the boxes. You get an account with UPS. UPS comes and picks up the stuff, and we did it. And we started, and we became very successful at it. So I was very, you know, very happy. And but then when the interest started declining a little bit, a few things happened at the same time. The interest started declining, and they started changing the way they marketed trains. And we sold, when we were first in business, we went in business in 1972. And I would say from 1972 to the mid-'80s, we sold the same item over and over and over again. There was a company called Athearn, which was the leading quality manufacturer of trains. There was companies like Tyco who, quite honestly, put out garbage. But a good product like Athearn was the leader. We used to sell their engines for $10, $11, $12 and sell thousands and thousands of them. And he probably made about, with all the different road names and everything, maybe 100 different locomotives. And we could never get enough of them.
There are honestly 100 different locomotives out there.
Way more than that. Way more than that.
I mean, even the railroad industry had, the actual railroad industry had.
There's a lot of different models of locomotives.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they would, and each locomotive was made in different road names. So you had like a Pennsylvania or a Santa Fe or something like that. And so, like I said, we sold these for years, and we could never get enough of them. I just like, send me whatever you want. Send me as much as you can. I don't care what you send. Just keep sending it. And we would sell everything we can get our hands on.
Well, you know, the railroad industry, as you know, the real railroad was the muscle of the country. You know.
Well, yeah,
it was,
and even that changed.
It brought the
all of a
country
sudden,
together. Yeah.
In the 70s, the railroads started merging. So where you had all these little railroads, you started getting fewer and fewer railroads. In the east, you had like all Pennsylvania, New York Central, Lehigh Valley. Well, they all wound up eventually as Conrail. The government took them over. Conrail was a semi-government corporation, kind of like the post office, and the government ran the railroads in the Northeast. And eventually, they got out of it, and they formed. There's only really two main railroads in the Northeast.
Amtrak. That's a
Amtrak is the passenger.
Yeah.
Okay. The other is the freight.
Oh, okay.
Amtrak is just a passenger, and that bleeds money for the government.
Yeah.
Also now, you know.
Yeah.
So, in any event, what happened was when they started marketing these trains later, they started making shorter runs, limited runs of different names. And I found out after a while that when they come out with one of these limited runs, also the price changed drastically. There were a lot of changes that went on in model railroading. And one of the things was that when I started, most of the locomotives that we sold were kits. Almost everything we sold was all kits. Today, everything is almost all ready to run. You don't have to do anything. You just put it on a track and run it.
Do you, can you show us, or do you have any examples of
Well, I have some pictures of the different
sizes?
the sizes, yeah.
All right.
Like if we bring up slide A, I guess it is, and then you'll see that I have the same locomotive in three different sizes, and then one much larger locomotive. The first size is N gauge, and that runs on 9mm track. The second one back is HO gauge, which is this engine that I have right here in my hand. This is just so you get an idea.
That's HO.
Of the size. This is HO. This is the most popular size. And then we go back. The third one back is O gauge, which is about the same size as Lionel.
Lionel.
And so most people think that's Lionel size. Lionel is actually not scale. Again, before I said it's a toy. So Lionel was never meant to be a scale model of a train. Lionel trains, for the most part, are cut down in size to go around tight curves. That they made it so Lionel has two sides of track. They have 027 and O. 027 is just what it is. It's a 27-inch circle.
Right, yes,
And
yes.
O gauge is a 30-inch circle. Okay, so HO gauge, this train here, which is a small train in HO, requires a 36-inch circle. So, because we talk even different things. Lionel, we talk circles. When we talk scale, we talk radius. So this needs an 18-inch radius minimum to run on. And something bigger than this would need like a 24-inch radius, which is a 4-foot circle, which so would just fit along the outside of a 4x8. In HO, you can only make one circle on a 4x8, whereas in Lionel, you could make two ovals on that same piece of plywood.
Well, I remember when I was young, the Lionel was the big thing in my house.
It was the big thing back then. But in the 60s, they jumped it over.
Whenever I ran it so fast, it
It
always
would
fell
fall off the track. Yeah,
all
yeah,
the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah. But you didn't. You see, Lionel. Another difference with Lionel is built much sturdier than HO or even O scale. These things are made to run at scale speeds. Lionel is sturdy. It's a toy. It's meant for kids. When I used to sell Lionel trains, I used to have a Lionel car that when I was talking to a customer about how sturdy Lionel is, I would take this Lionel car and throw it across the store.
No.
And I did that, I would say, I used that same car for maybe 20 years and threw it across my store thousands of times. And maybe it had a few chips here and there in the car, but it didn't break, and you could still put it on a track and run it.
Did your customers run out to saying this guy's crazy?
No. I would just, I would take it and toss it across the store, and it would bounce on the floor, and I would go back and I would pick it up and I would like twist it back and forth to show that it didn't, and they didn't break. They were meant for that. They were meant to fall off the side of the track. Whereas HO, if this train fell from this table to the floor, you would throw it away. It would be no good. You couldn't do nothing with it.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, I was a kid. I mean,
I want to tell you about the largest size locomotive that we have in that slide.
Oh, okay. There's a
We can
larger
run that
size.
slide back again.
Can we have that back again?
Slide A.
Slide A, sir. Thank you.
Okay, the large locomotive in the back, the steam locomotive, that is called G scale, and that is, G stands for kind of garden, and that's an outdoor. They
Stands
usually
for
don't
what?
use them in the house because they're so big.
Oh, I see.
And they're not very popular in this part of the country because this part of the country doesn't lend itself very well to outdoor
Environment,
trains like
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, but there are people that have whole complete layouts in their backyard, and they run trains like that, and then they bring them in. They have like a little doggy door, and they in the house, and they run the train through the doggy door.
Really?
You know, and get it back in the house to store it. But they run them out there all the time, and that's about each size. If you go through those 4 sizes, each one is about twice as big as the next one. Or if you come down half the size.
Do you have any more slides here?
I want to show some of the. I've been talking about a lot of the changes, but
We have 7 minutes left, so
okay. Well, we'll talk about that. That is how things are made today, and I have a sample in my hand here. I don't know if we can go to this, but years ago we talked about a 4x8 sheet of plywood. We don't do that anymore. Well, a lot of people don't do it anymore. This is insulation that you buy in Home Depot or Lowe's. And it's 2 inches thick, it's nice and hard. You put the track, and you don't nail the track anymore, you glue the track. Use silicone, you glue the track on it. And this has a lot of advantages. The first one is it's very light. So if you're working by yourself, and you're trying to get a 3/4 inch piece of 4x8 plywood in your house. That weighs like close to 50 pounds. You kind of drag it down the steps or up the steps or something like that. It's like, this here comes 2 foot by 8 foot. It weighs, I don't know, a few pounds. A woman could bring it up the stairs, no problem. And it's also 2x8, so it fits in, and it fits together. It has I don't know if you can see, it's a tongue and groove kind of system. So you could put them together to fit them together. And most of the layouts are made out of this. You still frame it with 1x4s, and you put this on top of it, and it's as sturdy as can be. And it has a lot of advantages. We all know about mountains and stuff like that, but if you wanted to make a depression under this for a culvert like to go under here, you could carve this out and make, and if you had a piece of plywood, you would have to saw it out and everything. This here, you just cut it out, and it's just wonderful to work on. So this is another one of the big changes that we have in trains.
Well, like you said, years ago, guys used to make their own houses and their own
Well,
shrubbery.
yeah, it's all different now. Like I said, years ago, almost everything we sold was kits. Today, almost everything that's made is ready to run. And there's a slide up now. That is a kit from years ago. I actually built this kit. And it's a bunch of sticks is essentially what they give you in a box. This years ago was like $8 to $10, something like that, for that kit. And that's what it looks like when you take it out of the box. There's a few wide pieces and a whole bunch of little sticks and some metal chain and stuff like that. And if you go to the next slide, that and the following slide after it are the instructions. And what you did was you laid these instructions out, and they're all full size, and you would cover them like with a piece of wax paper, and then build your model on top of the wax paper, and you would build each of the 4 sides and then put them all together, glue them together, and it took weeks, literally. I built this kit, and it took me, I don't know, I built it many years ago, and I don't remember how long it took me, but I can tell you it probably took me several weeks to build it. Today they have, I think about slide G, that's a more modern kit, and what you have there, you get the four walls, everything, the doors, the windows, they're all cast into it, and the brick is cast right into the plastic.
That's
So you
today.
That's today. You put these four walls together, and you put there's a roof goes on it, and you could put like you take a piece of clear plastic, thin plastic, and put it across the front to represent the windows, and you could build that. I could build that in an evening, no problem. This is what we have mostly today now. These are completely built. That's the package. There's just a cellophane piece that I didn't keep on it when I took this picture. And this is, you just take this off of that black plastic and put it on your train layout, and it's absolutely ready to go. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see, even in the back, it is completely detailed. You don't have to do anything to this. Whereas when you had one of the older kits, you had to do once you got it built, then you had to put it in place, then you had to start adding all the junk around it to make it look realistic. This comes absolutely completely, and the company that made that last kit also made this display, and the plastic kits that I showed before, those are a couple of the buildings that are built up. We used to use years ago, we used to use special modeling paint. Now we just use a regular spray can of Rust-Oleum or crayon, whatever brand, and you just spray them, and then we take a little talcum powder and brush it over them and make the mortar lines come out well.
Well, this is for people on the go.
Yeah, well, that's the way it is now. People want instant gratification today. They don't want to build it. You can't give a kid away, honestly. All the locomotives are ready to run. Even years ago when we sold a so-called ready-to-run locomotive, you still had to put like the handrails on it, you still had to put the windows into it and all that. Today, they absolutely come 100% complete in the box. You just take it out of the box. Of course, they're much more expensive. Years ago, a locomotive like this, we probably sold for $9.99, okay? A modern version of this, because now they have sound and they have DCC, where each locomotive is controlled individually on a track. It's probably about $250 for this locomotive. So it's much, much more expensive today. But you get more, you know. So.
Okay, looks like we're running out of time.
I see you
here.
signal in a minute, yep.
Yeah, see? Wow. Really got into it, though. We've got much, much more to talk about, right?
I guess I do. I've been in it since, well, as a hobby, I've been in it since I was about, I don't know, 10 years old, 11 years old. And as a business, I started in 1972 and ran it to after 2000. So I was in it for a few years.
So you're willing to come back and talk more about trains?
Yeah, sure.
We've got a lot more to talk about.
I could talk forever.
We even have some video of a nice train layout for another show.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.